higher. Put a little bit of shit, put a little bit of shit, put a little bit of shit. I'ma make it burn, I'ma make it burn, I'ma make it burn, I'ma make it burn, I'ma make it burn,
And we are live. 07's for the thumbnail. 07's in the chat. Let's get some energy up in here. I know most of y'all are, most of y'all are as hyped to talk about the grand chessboard as we are here at the barracks. That's why we keep it non-Euclidean up in here. Global thinking, multipolar thinking. We got to start thinking outside of this United States, this U.S. centric, the democratic, voting process every 4 years, and that's the extent of politics. No, we got to be seeing the roots of the grand chessboard. The grand chessboard, as Zbigniew Brzezinski called it in the 90s. Talking about the undercurrents of world powers. We're going to get into it. So thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to like the video, whether you're on YouTube or you're on x.com. My name is Teray. To my left, holding it down, he is the ghost with the most, our friendly neighborhood milkman. How you doing, Milk?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, we're talking about the caucuses today. There was a guy recently who tried to critique Haas by saying, like, oh, why don't you just talk about America? Like, that's what we care about, right? Well, guess what? That's not how our enemies think. Our enemies think, like Teray said, about the grand chessboard. It's a globalized world. They're all over the world. So if you're only thinking about America, you're blind in, I don't know, 6 out of 7 eyes, or 4 out of 5, however they do it. So yeah, we're talking about Armenia today. It is important. It's important for our revolutionary struggle to know what's going on in the rest of the world. Imagine, like during the American Revolution, wasn't it important what was going on in France, like between France and the UK? And that was, that was back when they had wooden ships and and they didn't even have telegrams. They had, I don't even know how they got mail back. I guess a guy brought it on a ship. So but they were still paying attention to what was going on in France, what was going on in Russia, what was going on in the UK. It was relevant to them in 1776. It's even more relevant to us today. So that's what we're talking about today. We got to my right. Oh, it is hard. Shit. We've got a special guest today who's going to help us understand this conflict in the region. Sul, how's it going, Sul?
It's going well. How are you guys?
Doing well. I didn't know until today that you had a collective. Yeah. So before we get into the details, you want to talk about your collective?
Yeah, of course. So I help run an account on Twitter. It's known as the Cars Collective. We're basically a small group of a handful of Armenians, editors, writers, whatnot, and we just basically write what's going on in Armenia. We send out some pieces. We talk about current events, the history, a lot of culture, and it's a perspective that I find a lot of people appreciating, because there's a lot of elements, particularly of our history, that many others don't really get the nuance of. They don't really go into the depth of these parts. There are so many similarities from other times that we keep seeing, especially when it comes to the Armenians. They keep seeing repeating and repeating over and over again. It's so important to really have that historic view. And I'm glad that all of us who work with Cars Collective definitely puts that view forward for our readers.
100%. Yeah, and so the reason we wanted to bring you on is because I don't see anyone talking about this about the recent flare-up of violence that went on between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which, considering how much goes on in the Caucasus and like the heartland of Eurasia, and how central it is to projecting U.S. military and soft power in the region, not just in the Gulf states, because like this is a region it's the heartland. It's north of the Gulf states. It's south of Russia. It's bordering Europe, and a lot of like strategic resources.
It's right north of Iran.
Yeah, right north of Iran. Yeah, right in the smack dab in the middle of two of the three quote unquote axis of evil powers, the new axis of evil,
right?
Iran, Russia, and China, and this region is smack dab in the middle of two. So it's surprising that there's a lot of ambivalence to the region, and we want to give people like y'all the space to have our eyes and ears on the ground.
Absolutely.
So the broad strokes, and always correct me if I'm wrong. The broad strokes are that the recent conflict going on between Azerbaijan and Armenia was over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which is this isolated region within Azerbaijan that is globally recognized as Azerbaijani territory, but is this disputed territory because it's majority ethnic Armenians.
Mm-hmm.
And the conflict was over Azerbaijan seeking to just do a military takeover of the region.
That's correct.
Yeah, and it got real hairy for like a couple of days. There's a lot of shooting going down, and Russia stepped in. And recently, it was only in the past few days that a peace deal was brokered. Azerbaijan got all of its military objectives that it was looking to achieve. It pretty much got all of its concessions. And I want to go into the details. Like, what were the strategic goals from Azerbaijan, and what kind of peace deal are we looking at here?
Absolutely. So just a very important correction here, though, is that the flare-up is not between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In fact, this is the first time that Armenia has absolutely not taken any part into Azerbaijan's offensive onto the Republic of Artsakh. And by the way, Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, it's basically both the same thing. I use it interchangeably. So to the ones listening, Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, basically the same thing. But Armenia, for the first time since the late 80s, is not involved at all. Armenia did not send any military aid, did not send any economic aid, resources, nothing like that. The prime minister of Armenia wants to his name is Nikol Pashinyan. He wants to completely clean his hands of what's to him the headache of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh. So when it comes to what exactly happened, the details of the of the capitulation is still quite unknown. We do know that disarmament is part of it. The Republic of Artsakh has agreed to completely demilitarize and give up all of its weapons, ammunition, all of that sort to the Russian peacekeepers in the region. However, of course, this is just the agreement by the representatives of the Republic of Artsakh. There are various regiments and militias that have not surrendered, and fighting is still going on, particularly in the northern regions and in the southeastern region. Most of, at least, I mean, we don't really know the exact map right now. There's a lot of information we do not know, but from some very few leaked photos of some and videos of some Azerbaijani soldiers in the area, we could vaguely conclude that they've taken much of the north, the northwest, some central areas of Nagorno-Karabakh. There's no doubt in my mind that we will be seeing the complete abolition of the Republic of Artsakh, and that in the coming days, it's no longer going to exist, which is going to spell out a very, very big disaster for the Armenians who live there.
Yeah, and to point out just like how much fighting had broken out. I remember reading in the Telegram chats that I'm following just to get a breakdown of the region. Follow the Barracks Telegram, by the way.
Yeah,
the link will be in the chat.
It's very active. Touré's killing it. It's very active.
Yeah, but some like at least one of the Russian peacekeepers were killed in the shootout.
Several, several, including some. Now I don't quite remember what exactly his rank was, but it was very high-ranking officer was also killed. Several peacekeepers, yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and the Republic of Artsakh is it's not that many people. It's like 100,000, 200,000 people.
Yeah, it's a little over 100,000 right now. Of course, it was more before the 2020
before the evacuations.
Yeah, exactly. But as of right now, there's approximately over 120,000.
Yeah, and like very little development, but like only about 100,000 people. Very little like infrastructure and development, but like the influence of it is like why this is such a heated region is because Armenians, even though it's not like geopolitically recognized as like part of Armenian territory, Armenians consider it like the birthplace of Armenia.
Yeah, definitely one of the birthplaces. The first Armenian language school, which popped up around the beginning of the 400s AD, actually took place in the Amaras monastery that is in Nagorno-Karabakh. As of 3 or 4 days ago, it has been occupied by Azerbaijani forces, and we're not sure what they're going to do with it.
And
Well,
go ahead.
I want to ask the next question. So it seems like this conflict between Russia and the U.S. and Ukraine is starting to spill over into other parts of the globe. Like you've got Wagner and Avricom both in Africa. We've been covering this coup belt, and obviously Russia's involved in this conflict here. Do you see NATO involvement at all, or maybe potentially in the future? Like what's the layout of the grand chessboard here?
Yeah, so NATO players are indirectly involved. Azerbaijani forces are, of course, have for over a decade now, of course, been training with NATO forces. Azerbaijan is, of course, funded up the wazoo by none other than the Republic of Turkey, which is a NATO member. And over the last 5 to 6 years, 70% of all arms and ammunition that Azerbaijan purchases comes from the Zionist entity, which, of course, while not part of NATO, is definitely indirectly involved in that sort of entire organization. Of course, they're funded by the United States to get a lot of funding from European countries. So while NATO is not directly associated or directly connected, they're of course definitely one of the big players indirectly in the war of aggression by Azerbaijan.
Right, and to what Milkman is referencing, the Grand Chessboard, was a famous book by U.S. foreign policy aide to a couple of presidents.
He was Secretary of State under Clinton, I think, wasn't
Yeah, he was a foreign advisor
like
to Lyndon B. Johnson, Jimmy Carter, and yeah, he was. I think you're right. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, who this big, like, one of the forefathers of neoconservatism. It's like, you have your Zbigniew Brzezinski that lead, and who is like on par with people like Henry Kissinger, who shaped U.S. involvement in breaking apart global superpowers who could challenge like the American military, especially in Eurasia, and yeah, considering he wrote the book The Grand Chessboard in 1997, when just a couple years after the fall of the Soviet Union, when countries like Armenia and Azerbaijan just became countries when they broke away from the now like defunct Soviet Union. And it's spooky how, like, back in the 90s, back in 1997, just how many of Zbigniew Brzezinski's ghoulish strategies are now starting to bear fruit in this process of encirclements like after the Soviet Union just like breaks apart. These new satellite states can now be used to harass Russia right up against its border, and to like you said, to like Azerbaijan just doesn't exist without Turkey, and it's also to harass Russia to the north, Iran to the south, and act as the satellite through Turkey.
Oh yeah, he wrote about Ukraine, about how Ukraine was going to be like the tip of the spear against Russia back in like the 80s.
Yeah, the Maidan. So considering
they've been planning this shit in Washington.
So considering that Zbigniew Brzezinski like had been planning something like the Maidan coup all the way back in 1997, and now we're starting to see this this flare up of between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which is like it's just has always sort of played this role with Turkey and with Western countries. Mm-hmm. Who like I want to like so the point that I'm making is that this is clearly like NATO is always going to be like in the background and involved. But I want to know who some of the local actors are who stand to benefit from this conflict. If something tells me that local natural gas gangsters might be getting some paychecks in the background, but I don't know.
Definitely. So there are so many different types of interests at different dimensions. Some of them are economic, some of them are political, some of them are a combination of both. And we can sort of start just zooming in, and then we just kind of zoom out and out until we get into the biggest picture. Mm-hmm. So, for example, let's just go ahead and start with the Zionists, right? Because this is actually a relationship that most people don't know. Azerbaijan supplies the Zionists 40% of their energy. And the Zionists supply Azerbaijan, at least in the last 5 to 6 years, 70% of their arms. So they do have a very strong relationship. Ilham Aliyev, even as early as either 2004 or 2005, I don't quite remember, but it was in the early 2000s. He said during an interview that Azerbaijan's relationship with the Zionist entity is like an iceberg, that only a bit of it is shown above the water. So this relationship has been very long-standing. And for Israel, really, it's quite simple. They want to have an ally, or rather a satellite state that borders Iran. Very, very simple. The Zionists have been operating air bases from Azerbaijan for a number of decades. Mossad operates out of Baku. There's been a number of assassinations that Mossad have been conducting within the territory of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and many of these Mossad agents, they actually operate right out of Baku. So for Israel, what Azerbaijan is sort of how Iran, both morally, politically, and economically, holds support for Hezbollah in the north of Israel. So basically, the Zionists are trying to mimic that relationship. The Zionists say, "Oh, you have your organization that's north of me. Well, I'll have my country that's north of you." So that's sort of how they play it. So that's from Israel's point of view. Locally, when it comes to within the territory directly of Nagorno-Karabakh, well, number one, of course, Nagorno-Karabakh is on an immensely high plateau, extremely mountainous. Many of the rivers and other bodies of water that come out of the South Caucasus, they're basically sourced in Artsakh. And Azerbaijan is having a very big water crisis. So part of the reason, now, of course, it's not the main reason, but we're starting small. But part of the reason is also that Azerbaijan wants control of that water plateau, of that water source plateau, because they're having a lot of terrible droughts of that sort, and they really do need that water. Another extremely important element is, of course, the natural resources here. Nagorno-Karabakh is very, very rich with a lot of mining resources, copper, iron, some of that sort, that excuse me, that exist underground in the Republic of Artsakh. And the thing is that it's not even Azerbaijan, at least not directly speaking, that wants its hands on this. And in fact, who wants their hands on this are a lot of Western corporations that have bought these treaties, these contracts rather, from Azerbaijan to have mining rights in this region. It's called Zangezur. Zangezur. These are a lot of very local geographical terms, but Zangezur is basically what would be the region that's immediately bordering Armenia to the southeast, that's included within the Republic of Artsakh. So it's like this, just this slim mountain range. It's called Zangezur. And one such example is Anglo-Asian mining. So Anglo-Asian mining, they're based in London in the UK, and they have contracts with Azerbaijan to mine the resources of Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, unfortunate for them, they have not been able to fulfill their contracts because Artsakh does not allow them to mine there, right? Because all of their contracts are, of course, with Baku. They're not with the Republic of Artsakh. And for those of you who don't know, Anglo-Asian mining, one of their top shareholders, I believe, is John Sununu, who was the chief of staff for I think Big Bush. I think Bush Senior. He was the chief of staff for Bush Senior, and he was also, or currently is, I don't quite recall. I believe he was the governor of New Hampshire as well. So he's very well tied with, of course, American politics. He earns, I'm assuming, quite a big cut from Anglo-Asian mining. So this is sort of the other dimension of it. And finally, the biggest dimension of it, the really big picture, and I would say the main reason, right? All of these other reasons that I just mentioned, they're all secondary, tertiary. The main reason here actually has absolutely nothing to do with Armenia nor Artsakh. This just happens to be a small part of it, but it actually has nothing to do with Armenia or Artsakh. It's the fact that the Republic of Azerbaijan, they have direct water access to Central Asia, right? Just you take a ferry out of Baku across the Caspian Sea, and you come to Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, of course, a lot of those other Turkic countries in Central Asia. So that's just a ferry ride from Baku. Now, if you also look at the map that I see up, if you look right to the south of Armenia, to the south west, there's this exclave of Azerbaijan. It's known as Nakhichevan. So it's right on the south of it. It's that little tiny sliver of land. It looks like an oval on the side. There you go. Yeah. So that is also part of Azerbaijan, but it's not connected to the mainland of Azerbaijan, right? So it's just a little piece. It's this exclave that's outside. Now that piece of Nakhichevan is connected to Turkey. There's a very, very slim connection, but they do have a very small route for connection. So basically, the picture that I'm painting here is that Europe, the Western powers, the Western elite, they want to have direct access into Central Asia. And they have this corridor. It's known as, at least to them, they call it the Middle Corridor, but Armenians, we call it the Pan-Turkic Corridor. This corridor, it connects Central Asia all the way to Europe. So it goes from Europe, it goes to Turkey, goes through Eastern Turkey, goes to Nakhichevan. And then look at that, Nakhichevan, has no connection to Azerbaijan because Armenia is right in the middle. And then from Azerbaijan, it goes across the Caspian Sea into Central Asia. The one little thing in the middle is just that little sliver of land known as Southern Armenia. We call it the province of Sunik, which is also bordered by the Republic of Artsakh to its east. So there's this entire corridor. It goes, I don't know, 1/3 the length of the globe, right? It goes from Portugal all the way to Central Asia. It connects Europe to Central Asia. And the one thing in the middle is just that tiny little part of Armenia, Southern Armenia, known as Sunik, which is, of course, bound by Artsakh to its east. So the whole point that this conflict even exists in the first place is that Azerbaijan wants to eventually have its corridor through Armenia that would be connecting Azerbaijan to its other exclave, Nakhichevan. So Azerbaijan wants a direct access to there. And once that is done, the entire Western elite, the Western powers would have their direct access point to Central Asia. Now, why is this important? Not to mention the resource-rich areas of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. That's, of course, an obvious one. The more geopolitical sort of idea here is that, well, Central Asia, it's in the underbelly of Russia, right? Very long border, unprotected border. So it's in the underbelly of Russia. It's right to the west of the Uyghurs in China, who are also a Turkic people. So that's an access point for the destabilization of China from that point. Of course, it's north of Iran on two sides, of course, from the side of Azerbaijan and from the side of Turkmenistan. So it's basically this direct route into the heart of Eurasia. And the only thing that's stopping the European powers from having direct access to it is just little tiny Armenia. So that's basically the big picture that the imperialists are painting here.
Right, and speaking of, there's an echo. Speaking of like Armenia, like, so that's like Armenia just locally, like as it makes sense, the people like most involved in the fighting and who have a stake in a conflict like this of redrawing borders between two countries are like directly involved in that region. But I had seen a video. I'll pull it up on Telegram. I had seen a video of an Armenian-led protest in the United States, and I think it was in Los Angeles. Yeah, downtown Los Angeles. Just trying to make this this eye-catching headline, while Russia is in the middle of trying to broker a peace deal here. You have these. Yeah, you have a handful of Armenians in Los Angeles. Yeah, it's less than 20 people just blocking the entire Los Angeles freeway. So I just wanted to ask, what's the role that the diaspora plays in this? Like, are they making this? I mean, obviously, the United States does this all the time, is using diaspora communities to to escalate conflict. Is that present at all locally?
So there's, I mean, of course, Armenians have a very big diaspora. There's more Armenians outside of Armenia than in Armenia. Armenia has a population of less than 3 million. It's like 2.8 or 2.9 million people in all of Armenia. And outside of Armenia, it's something like 8 million or some number like that. So we have a very immense diaspora. They're mostly focused in countries like Russia, France, the United States, of course, a lot of countries in the Middle East like Syria, Lebanon, and Iran. But the thing is that most people, I would say, misunderstand is that oftentimes the diaspora, and this is not just, of course, about the Armenians. This is true for every diaspora. A lot of Armenians have this misconception that the diaspora in these foreign countries could be used to sort of call for the interests of the state of Armenia, right? That this is a way that Armenia can influence the United States through the American diaspora. This is the way that Armenia could influence France through the French Armenian diaspora, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's actually the other way around, right? Rather, the diasporas are always used by the host country in order to spread their influence or their interests to the original country. So it's not that Armenia uses the Armenian diaspora to influence the United States, but rather the United States uses the American diaspora to influence Armenia. Of course, as I said, this is not true for just Armenians. This is just a general truth about all diasporas in general. We know how America uses the Cuban diaspora. We know how they use the Iranian diaspora. So this is just the way that it operates. Now, of course, the Armenians within the United States, they're not doing this out of malice, right? They genuinely, at least most of them, want to help Armenia. They have good intentions. They have a good heart, right? But because many Armenians in the United States are, of course, they're born and raised in the United States. They have a good relationship with the people that they live with, right? Is that oftentimes the stuff that they advocate is usually some way or another more American intervention, right? Either indirectly or directly. They call for the United States to, have some UN resolution on our behalf, or they want America to, send aid, money or military aid, whatever it be. They want NATO to intervene. Now, once again, they usually do this with good intention. I'm not going to say anything about that. But of course, this would be completely detrimental to the interests of Armenia. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize, is that all of these acts of quote unquote goodwill is actually not a way for Armenia to be helped, but it's rather a way for the United States to exert its influence on Armenia, right? And this would be detrimental for a number of reasons. Number one, and this is, of course, the most obvious one, is that any NATO action, any NATO aid, any NATO intervention, whatever it may be, will always be coming from which country? It'll be coming from Turkey, because Turkey is the only NATO country that borders Armenia. So we would be de facto seeing a Turkish-led occupation or something similar to that, which, of course, is not in the interest of Armenia. And then secondly, this also chips away at Armenia's attempt to have some sort of economic independence, because we have to remember that, especially from Western countries, that aid, whether it be military or economic, whatever it be, is never done in goodwill, right? The United States sends other countries aid just to have something back, whether it be through access to resources, whether it be through these quote unquote democratic initiatives. You want to look at your democracy index. Don't you want a higher number or something? Something like that.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's always some like backhanded sort of aid, which
comes with a lecture about how it doesn't have enough non-government organizations in the region.
Exactly. So
and then aid which discourages local development. Like when you said that Azerbaijani natural gas doesn't even go to people who live in Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
That's
go to Israel.
Yeah. It's just this same neo-colonial relationship of just
Exactly.
of keeping a country.
Funny that you actually mentioned the gas. A lot of Armenians tend to also have pretty positive views towards France. Macron has given some sort of positive statements for Armenia. Macron seems to want to be involved in South Caucasian politics. But the truth is that France actually owns 1/3 of the shares of the Azerbaijan gas corporations, excuse me. They own 1/3 of the shares. So they're actually making enemies from our opponents. So all of their statements of so-called goodwill are honestly, it's pretty flat. It's not, it's just empty words. They're just trying to do it to appease the Armenian diaspora within France, also some of the more Christian-minded people within France. They're trying to pit it as, oh, these are the poor Armenian Christians fighting the Muslims over here, whatever. France likes to have those sort of initiatives there. And the other third, that's the other third of that, of the gas sort of companies, is owned by the UK. So 1/3 owned by France, 1/3 owned by London, and then the last third is owned actually by the UAE. So by I forgot which of the Emirates specific. I believe it was Abu Dhabi specifically. So it's owned 1/3 by Abu Dhabi. So again, these are a lot of the countries that seem to have positive relations with Armenia, right? France, UK, they always try to speak on Armenia's behalf, at least, by words. The UAE also, during the 2020 war, I believe that they put up the colors of the Armenian flag, like onto the Burj Khalifa or some of the other buildings there, like as a show of solidarity. But as you can see, it's literally empty words. It's completely empty because they're making money off of our opponents, and so they have no interest to weaken or destabilize Azerbaijan. They have absolutely no interest in that because their money always comes first.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned the Prime Minister Pashinyan, and there's some pretty serious protests going on right now.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, what are the protests about? What are the goals? And do you think they represent popular will in Armenia, or is it maybe a minority that's looking to exercise,
as we speak, almost every major city in Armenia, from what I understand, has gone on strike. Many companies, many industries have gone on strike. Almost, from what I understand, at least, a vast majority of the schools and colleges are completely empty because all of the students have gone onto the streets to protest. This is definitely an indigenous movement here, right? I would not have characterized that, for example, in the 2018 protests, which led to the rise of Pashinyan in the first place, through what at least Armenians in my circle, what we call was a color revolution back then. But this one is definitely much more in tune with the demands of the people. Over 30 opposition parties to Nikol Pashinyan have united under a what did they call it? The National Committee. It was something like that. They've elected their own sort of leaders of that organization. Some of those leaders are pretty important generals that have made a very lasting impact during the first Artsakh war in the early 90s. So this is definitely an organization that I think really, really wants to oust Pashinyan. And in fact, that is their direct statement. That is what they want. They want to remove Pashinyan from power. Now, whether or not that will happen, we will see. I have my reservations. After so many years of attempts to remove Pashinyan, he's proven to be very efficient at staying in power. But what I will say is that these have been the biggest anti-Pashinyan protests, I would say, to date. So many of these protests, they have been met with police brutality, police violence. And by the way, the Armenian police is trained by the United States, just so that's known. In fact, they had a training something like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, where the United States was training Armenian police on how to do crowd control. So this was definitely something that was expected. These protests were definitely something that were expected, because otherwise the coincidence would be, it would be crazy. So we'll see where it goes. Of course, we're barely in the dawn of it. It's been like 2 days, 3 days, really only 2 days that it's gotten so serious. It's been going on for more than that, but at the scale that it is right now, it's only been like 2 days. So we'll see where it goes. I'm definitely looking forward to it, but I want to keep my hopes at least grounded.
Yeah, from what I can tell, there's a lot of work going into making sure that this fighting, like regardless of like the a scattering of armed insurgents like throughout the region, that it looks like Russia has been pretty successful in at least making sure that this doesn't escalate any further. That seems to be from what I've gathered on Telegram. Again, follow the Telegram channel if you haven't already. But they've done a good job with dearmament, with evacuation of the Nagorno-Karabakh region. They evacuated like more than 5,000 people so far, and I just think this sentiment of this popular sentiment. Like, I found this video. This was in Moldova, which is south of Ukraine. It's not.
Alex Soros
It's
was just
the
in
west of
Moldova.
Ukraine.
Alex Soros was in Moldova this week. Just something to note.
Right, it's west of Ukraine. Like in this Eurasian region, like this guy in Moldova filming, being filmed, filming U.S. soldiers in his garden. You can see the U.S. flags on the uniforms, like speaking English with this, and saying like, "Oh, we're here to help," and then just this random guy just saying, like, Russia isn't here in Moldova. You're here. You're fucking us up, and we want you to leave. And it's the same. Yeah, you have police in Armenia being trained by the U.S. You have like the U.S. presence in the region is so strong that you have people who are really like sick of that. Really sick of that presence. Who they know who the fighting is being goaded on by, which probably has a lot to do with why Russia has been seeing some momentum with these peace deals.
Has anyone else noticed that they're like surrounding Russia with like these women, with like these women leaders? You've got Sanna Marin in Finland. You've got that crazy woman in Estonia. There's a woman in power in Moldova. There's that woman who was screaming in Poland. What's going on with that? It's like a witch coven surrounding Russia. And today, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, speaking of witches, that Zelensky wants fucking Marina Abramovich to come rebuild his schools. What's going on? What, dude? I'm just saying. You mentioned earlier, talking about Armenia, how NATO was like indirectly involved. That's how they do things. They always do things in the shadows with conspiracies, with these like shadowy figures. I think there might be more. They're always more involved than it seems. Then it comes out 50 years later, So like, Absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised. You said they're training the cops.
Yep.
So if they're explicitly training the cops, I'm sure there's a lot more like backroom shit going on. That's what I would guess. Sounds like Azerbaijan.
A lot of people don't know this, but the second largest U.S. embassy in the world is in Armenia, which doesn't make sense. Armenia is a tiny country; it's not necessarily resource rich. The largest U.S. embassy in the world is, of course, none other than Baghdad in Iraq, and the second largest is in Armenia. Now, this is of course not because of America's great relationship with Armenia, of course, being sarcastic, but it's because, Armenia is right north of Iran. It's right south of Russia. It's next to Turkey. It's next to the Arab states. It's like a perfect region to really have your operations. And if Armenia truly wants to be independent, it needs to put its national interests first and do what it must with the U.S. Embassy.
That's interesting. I would never have guessed that's where the second biggest
Yep.
embassy was.
Yep.
That's crazy. So they're sitting there. Because in Baghdad it's like a whole compound.
Yep.
That's interesting. So it's like I said, our enemies are very concerned with this stuff. So ignore it at your own peril.
And then
It's important to them. It should be important to you.
Yeah, and then there's like you were saying with these protests. That's some of the some footage from those protests of law enforcement, those U.S. trained law enforcement, just making a lot of detainments for these protests, demanding Pashinyan's resignation, and just continuing to this civilian involvement in trying to call for Pashinyan's resignation, just still going strong while the peace deal is being negotiated. But the one of the opposition leaders, Tevanyan, was detained. So like civilians up to and including like opposition leadership.
Yep. Many opposition leaders, many figures, even tangentially related to opposition figures, have been arresting. Various family members of these people. There's been a lot of very unimaginable brutality in Armenia. Women have been hurt. It's a very big deal. It's a type of police brutality that really has never been seen in Armenia before. It's completely shocking to many Armenians to see such a thing.
Yeah, that's
Damn. Well, this is definitely an area to keep your eye on. I mean, it's like we've been saying, right near Russia, right near Iran, across the sea to Xinjiang. There's a reason the second biggest embassy is there, which again I never would have guessed, but it's a very significant. It's a small country, but it's a very significant region. So definitely
geography.
Yeah.
Speaking
you guys
of which,
want to have a little fun? Want to have a little fun for the last 10 minutes?
Wait. Speaking of which,
Okay.
There's been some chatter from our local, our favorite, one of our favorite spooks, Peter Zion. He talked about the conflict this morning, and trying to give an overview of just like the history of Armenian Azerbaijani conflict and like the relationship to the United States government. And he ended darkly. He ended the video just saying like, oh, and next, for the next in this series, like of the Caucasus, we're going to be talking about Chechnya. Just hinting at like again, he's one of those like acolytes of Zbigniew Brzezinski. Peter Zion is, like
literally named Zion, huh?
Yeah, funny. But have you heard? Because I mean, Chechnya is one of those regions, that that the CIA pulls a lot of Islamic insurgents from.
Yeah,
you see a lot of Chechen fighters in a lot of like Chechen ISIS members just like in fighting for Zelensky's government in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So and it's again that's just to the north of Armenia and Azerbaijan. Do you see any chattering of conflict brewing in Chechnya? Because like if you don't, I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing it soon.
I'm not quite sure. I don't. I don't really, know a lot of information on that part of the North Caucasus. But what I will tell you is that during the first war, in the early 90s, 1991 to 1994, a lot of Chechen fighters did come to serve with the Azerbaijani armed forces. We did see a lot of Chechen fighters that were taking part in that. Now, there was a lot less, I think, because I haven't really heard too much about it, but I'm pretty sure there was a lot less of those Chechen fighters. They still did exist, but there was a lot less in the 2020 war, which was pretty massive. But instead, what we saw in the 2020 war was a lot of the Syrian opposition. There was a lot of Free Syrian Army and organizations related to those, and of course related to ISIS and such, that were fighting on the side of the Azerbaijani armed forces. And this has also been confirmed by Iran, who has publicly released sort of like radio signals that they've intercepted that were completely and totally in Arabic. And we know Azerbaijanis, they don't speak Arabic. So we know for a fact that there were a lot of fighters from that part of the world that were fighting on the side of Azerbaijan.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if in response to these peace deals, we're gonna see like a broader conflict erupt in the region. So we might have to do a part 2.
Yes, yes. This war on Artsakh, it is just the beginning. It is just the beginning, because Azerbaijan's ultimate goal is that it wants to secure a corridor through Armenia, right? In that huge map that I told you. They want, and they've stated this multiple times, they say that Armenia is next. They want to take control of southern Armenia, and it's through basically 2 provinces, Syunik, which is the main one, and there's also one right above it. It's called Vayot Tsor. These both connect to their exclave of Nakhichevan, so they want some sort of connection through that. So we may very well see a very big war erupt for those regions if, of course, if Pashinyan doesn't just capitulate completely, even without a bullet shot, which he sort of already did, by the way, because during the 2020 war, Pashinyan agreed to have the corridor through Armenia. The only source of conflict right now is that Armenia is saying, we'll give you a corridor, but it stays within Armenia, as in like this one road that goes through Armenia, you'll have visa-free access, or something of that sort. But it's going to be administrated by Armenia. And Azerbaijan wants to literally annex it right through Armenia. So that's the source of conflict. So technically, Pashinyan has already agreed to it because he's a capitulator. He's already agreed with it, but the whole conflict is who is trying to administrate it. And because of this, Azerbaijan is probably going to take it by force if their demands are not met.
Right. Yeah, this we'll definitely have to keep an eye on this one, because which reminds me, once again, reminding y'all to follow us on Telegram if you don't already. Link is in the description of the video, and we dropped it in the chat. But yeah, that's
we will not be making a new Discord.
Discord is
for feds and groomers. We're not about that shit. Come follow the Telegram. Get your non-Euclidean intelligence straight from the tap.
Yeah, with that, before we move it, we just wanted to appreciate you, Sul, for coming on to break it down for us.
Of course.
Because this is a big
being invited.
This is a big way that the U.S. That people in Congress manufacture support for these conflicts is by keeping us in the dark and having like no outside opinions except their own. Like we have to listen to people like Peter Zion of whether or not we should start getting involved in sending armaments to the region, because we have to support this or that ethnic conflict. So we appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
And you feel free to stick around for the last.
Well, I was thinking maybe we'll just do this as a clip tomorrow, because it's gonna be a real lurch. I don't have a segue planned.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just, because we don't really have anything planned for tomorrow. Maybe I'll just make it a clip and we'll post the clip tomorrow.
Gotcha. Well,
Unless, I mean,
yeah, no,
we're about to hit an hour,
Yeah, we'll keep
and
it.
it's
We'll keep it
completely
brief.
irrelevant.
Yeah, we'll keep it brief. Because y'all are trying to wind down for your Friday night. You're all ready to roll into the weekend. So yeah, we'll call it early tonight. Because it's been a dense discussion.
Yeah.
Which we
you
all
got a real depth of knowledge on
Yeah,
the
we've
topic.
just we've barely scratched the surface. If we were to go into depth, it would be like 10 hours long.
Yeah, so we'll make sure to reach out to you again soon.
I thank you so much. Yeah, I
You got
appreciate the
anything you want
opportunity.
to plug?
We in the Armenian community, we do have one revolutionary fighter. His name is Monte Melkonyan. Monte Melkonyan, very well-known national hero. He was martyred during the First War in 1993, and many of his prophecies have come true. In 1988, for example, he said that if Armenia were to ever leave the USSR, that would make Armenia a target of Turkish NATO aggression. Well, that's exactly what happened in 2020. And then in 1993, one of his last public interviews, he said something that was quite daunting, especially considering his past of prophecies coming true. He said that if Armenia were to ever lose Artsakh, then we turn the final page of our history. So, ending pretty dark, but it's just it's a rallying call for Armenians that this is not just about this territory or that territory. This is very much the extinction of our country, of our nation. That's the subject here.
There you have it, folks. Clip it, wrap it up, put a bow on it. Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. And yeah, we'll make sure to see you, if not over the weekend, then bright and early next week with a fresh helping of news, theory, and intelligence. We appreciate y'all for tuning in. Like the video if you haven't already. But that's all we got, folks. We're out.